Raytheon and E-Systems and Hughes and began our own transformation, and since then have taken it to new levels. And with that, I'd like to introduce the next speaker, which is the Chairman and CEO of Raytheon Corporation, Dan Burnham.
Thank you, Rusty. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me. And it's hard not to get excited about this subject. And I do look forward to the questions, and I'll give you straight answers, as did General Wiles. But as we get started here, let us remind ourselves, as he did, that this is not an academic process that we're going through here today. Iraqi freedom is happening as we speak, and it reminds us of the enormous responsibilities that we all share to make our men and women have what they need when they need it. So, on behalf of the more than 76,000 folks at Raytheon, many of whom are veterans and are today in harm's way with our soldiers and sailors and airmen, we again thank all the people in this room for giving us the opportunity to work on your behalf. Yeah, I believe that the information that we share, the ideas that we examine, and the proposals that we all evaluate, all of these contribute to greater and closer government and industry cooperation, and ultimately to better and faster deployed systems and services for the warfighter. This is useful stuff that we do here. I'm really a strong believer in the focus of this conference. In fact, I think a strong believer doesn't quite get it. One of the points that I'm going to be making here about driving change is the change has to be driven by an obsessive, compulsive, unbalanced person. And I am guilty on all of those dimensions when it comes to lean and or Six Sigma. We can get into a religious discussion of the difference between lean and Six Sigma. I will probably be using the terms in a way that can be transferred back and forth. But this power of transformation, which is really what we're talking about here, is its heart and soul uplifting and indeed ennobling for the people who do it. Remember way back reading philosophy books and other things that work can be ennobling? I believe it thoroughly and deeply. It's into my soul. That's why I get so excited about this whole endeavor we're talking about. It gets people pumped. They go home at night feeling a lot better than they came in. And isn't that what we as leaders have as an obligation? By the way, I'm kind of proud that I was at the first Lean Aircraft Initiative meeting. I knew nothing, but it didn't keep me from going. And it's been a long time, and I've learned a little. And if you learn by the amount of scar tissue you have, well, then I guess I am a proud learner, and I'm loaded with scar tissue. It doesn't surprise me, though, that the armed forces really have become the leaders in lean thinking and transformation thinking. Now, why would I say that? Why would I say it doesn't surprise me? It's the armed forces that are taking the lead in transformation. Well, way back in a former life, we went and sort of concluded that the key to the success of our organization or enterprise was, sure, we had to have the right technology, absolutely, had to have the right capabilities and the right people. But if we had all that and didn't have the right leadership, then, you know, we were going to sub-optimize. And we were very aggressively trying to learn from the outside. Big organizations run the risk, as everybody in this room knows, of becoming internally focused and saying, this is how we do things from here. An idea from outside of the enterprise is seen as some kind of a contaminant. So we said, well, if we're going to go out and learn about what leadership is, because that was critical in the change of the prior company, who does this well? And we went and did a very serious benchmarking endeavor, took a look at a lot of organizations, and concluded that the best leadership training in the entire world is done by the uniformed services in the United States. Full stop. So therefore, why should we be surprised that it's uniformed services that indeed are thought leaders in so many regards in transformation thinking? Think of that Air Force pilot and a high-performance fighter. Now, what are the values that are driving this pilot? Speed? Yeah, sure. Agility? Yeah. Flexibility? Got it. Responsiveness? Better believe it. Focus? Intensity? Passion. Aren't those the same behavioral aspects we expect of any leader of anything, especially leader of transformation? Well, I was asked to follow General Wiles to talk about industry enterprise transformation. Well, like the armed services, we have been indeed through the throes of a transformation in our industry. So I'm going to talk about the industry transformation from the perspectives of our own company. So maybe a way to start off is, what is the desired end state of our organization of 76,000 people? It's the only way I know how to even talk about transformations. What are you doing it for? Which is to lay out the desired end state. One of the more profound learnings I had was from Bob Galvin, maybe 12, 13 years ago. And he came and gave a speech on Six Sigma. And he talked about what got him excited about it. What got him excited about the whole notion is way back when they were making car radios. And back in those days, car radios didn't work very well. And somebody came in and said, Bob, we have a serious problem. Ford's all over our case. And we got to make these things better. But we know we can make them 10% better. And he said, well, if that's the case, how often will they fail? And I've forgotten what he said. I'll make it up, half the time or something. He said, that's not good enough. We have to be perfect. And this person said, you can't be perfect. He said, why not? Why not? Why can't we be perfect? I remember that like it was yesterday, and I think about it all the time. And why can't we be perfect in everything? Well, maybe we can't, but why can't we aspire for it? So what do we aspire for in our company? For speed, for agility, for responsiveness, for focus, for intensity, and we only do it if we're filled with passion. Does that sound like that young Air Force pilot? So like the Air Force and the Armed Forces, we in our company are trying to transform ourselves to meet the needs of a highly uncertain era where the threats are varying and the pace of technology change is just unbelievable. The pressure on technology change is self-evident on the battlefield and in industry, and you can't really think of a more dramatic example of it than the acceleration of technology, than this huge change in the capability in just more than a decade from Desert Storm to Iraqi freedom. I remember when we talked about Desert Storm as the paragon of technological virtue. Now we talk about it as somehow it's back in the days of Napoleon. So what are they going to be saying 10 years from now? Think about Moore's Law. Look at what's happening to the kill chain. Just as we feel the effects of accelerating change in technology and capabilities, we are also the agents of these change. We, in industry and government together, must fundamentally change ourselves, and we have hardly begun to do so, to respond to these new and evolving needs. And clearly, we need to think of ourselves as part of a seamless team. Now, in addition to this evolving threat and accelerating technology, we need to function within the context of limited resources. While defense spending is clearly up, we still can't do everything that we can dream of. That means we have to prioritize, to organize ourselves and set up processes to increase the likelihood that we make the right decisions. Now, I hope our experience in Raytheon with transformation might suggest some parallels for everybody else in the room. And let me say at the outset that we in industry clearly have as much or more to learn from the government about transformation as is the other way around. First, some overall observations of our experience. First, there's no monolithic way to change, nor is transformation likely to produce nice, predictable staircase progress. We found that this is really hard stuff. Bumps in the road, unforeseen obstacles. But we also found that it is truly exhilarating, and I'm going to give you some facts to support that, as it's just filling us with passion and exuberance. Now, we believe that all this is driven by two things, and you all know it, but let me remind you of it. First is the burning platform, and second, the vision. Can you imagine a vision of, well, we'll get a little better? How is that going to excite you to come into work? It's not going to excite me. So for our industry, and most likely for the Air Force too, the platform began to burn brightly in 1989 with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. For 40 years, we had been organized together to develop and produce systems to counter something we knew, a monolithic threat. The technology change really was one-dimensional: thrust, counter-thrust, counter-counter-thrust. Defense budgets, they'd fluctuate, but they were generally predictable. It was a dangerous environment, but it was a clear environment. Then the Cold War ended. Defense procurement began its 60% decline. Then the dynamics of the industry dictated, and we were told at that proverbial Last Supper, you've all heard about that? Secretary of Defense brings in the CEOs of the defense companies and says, boys, and at that time as boys still is, we've got to make some changes there. He said, your world is about to be shattered. Consolidate or die. Boy, did we have a burning platform. Waves of merger and acquisition activity followed. We quickly became bigger, and in the process, we quickly became poorer. Our debt went from nothing to $13.3 billion. This is a lot of money in anybody's equation. We brought together E-Systems, who had done Chrysler Technologies before that, and TI and Hughes. Now, you might say, well, that kind of all the same. How big a transformation is that? I mean, Hughes makes missiles, Raytheon makes missiles, big deal. Okay, I've got a pretty good analogy. Navy flies airplanes, Air Force flies airplanes, all the same. All right. Okay, you got the point, right? It wasn't easy. This was then followed by immense consolidations and layoffs. And in the process, of course, we had, the nice word is, perturbations in our program performance. We have about, derisive laughter is an inappropriate response. We're at about 9,000 programs. We have about 9,000 programs. And we kind of, imagine when we shut down about 25% of our productive capacity, laid off 20,000 employees, moved people from all around the country. Well, you can imagine the chaos that we all felt. And as a result of that, our customers felt it. So like the armed forces, we had a brave new world to deal with. We had to change. We had no choice but to change ourselves in every possible dimension. It was difficult and it was time-consuming, to say the least. But we did several things. First, and this seems so obvious, and everything kind of sounds obvious in the telling, and by the way, it's always, when you talk about how you got here, it's always done as if it was well-planned, perfectly laid out, and on target. And so maybe it was a little more chaotic than it'll describe. But the first thing is, we got the senior executives and said, it's us. We're going to die or thrive together. And we shared in the gains financially. They're not only responsible for their own line, they're responsible for the whole organization. Well, that was very countercultural. But it was a big deal. It was a way to start. We started meeting regularly as a team. We shaped a vision of what perfection would be like. And again, I started off with this precept that Six Sigma, call it lean if you want, I don't care. starts with the premise that we can achieve perfection. So we had to lay out our vision of the company, which was simple: to be the most admired defense and aerospace supplier in the world, based on technology and world-class people, period. And we talk about it all the time. Where do we stand on that transformation? But we know where it is. By the way, did I mention Six Sigma? We kind of talked about that too. We developed clear goals, clear values. We keep them on little cards. I always have them in my wallet, but I just gave one away this morning because people are always asking. But we have it all down there. It's very clear what we're all about. It might sound a little mind-numbing, almost like Mao's little red book. But the fact is, with a big organization going through a lot of change, we have to have the same language. And Six Sigma gave us the same language. What does stretch goals mean? Does it mean that, well, I'm going to give you my goal, you're going to give me a higher goal, but if I can do what I said I was going to do, and I don't do the goal you gave me, that's okay, because that was a stretch goal and you didn't really mean it? Or a stretch goal is, no. Negotiations are over, that's the goal. Well, what do you mean by it? Well, you can find yourself saying the same things and meaning different things. Six Sigma gave us a common language, which I think is fundamental to having a common culture. We developed, also every employee became immersed in what we were trying to do. The way we did that, just as Les said, was communicate, communicate, communicate. I knew that I was starting to make some progress. When I started down a particular theme that I was talking about, the lips were moving along with mine, which takes about 18 repetitions of common themes, and you don't complicate it with a lot of new stuff. I got a flavor of that, by the way, and I don't want to oversimplify this, but I mentioned we had a serious cash problem. We had to deal with our balance sheet or we were going to have serious problems. I went and visited an operation, happened to, the operators were in union, which makes zero difference, and that's the reason I mentioned it. And of course, the folks want to take me on a prescribed tour, which I immediately walked off of the prescribed tour, and I'm wandering around, and I walked over to an inspector, and I said, hey, what are you up to? And this person, I found out later, was there for 25 years. She said, it's simple what I'm doing. I said, yeah, you're doing some inspections? She said, no, I'm here to try to reduce our debt. Didn't you know that was important? She says to me. And she didn't know I was going to come over and see her. Thinking, hey, I'm starting to make some difference. Now, by the way, when we go talk, it's, yeah, how are we doing on CPI and CSI, and what are our award fees, and how many RED programs? I mean, so we've got somewhat different themes now throughout, but they are clearly throughout because we are mindlessly repetitious of these things, to the point, really, of nausea, which is the only way I know how to do it. We decided, too, that there's 3 planning pillars: the strategic planning process, the annual operating process, and the human resource review process. I could go on any one of those things, but they all have to come together. They all have to come together. You all know about strategic planning and budgeting. Well, what about the human resource process? I'll give you a little example of that. What does everybody say are the big blockers to what we're trying to do? It's never the frontline troops. Never. Because they see all the chaos and craziness in the way we do things. They want change. There's no skin off their back to change. Senior executives, no problem, because if they don't like it, they're gone. So we bring in a new team, and they love it. They salute, bang, they're off. And so what happens, the people in the front line say, well, the problem in the senior executives, because you sound okay, you know what you're talking about, it's all them. Them meaning middle management. You talk to middle management, you say, what's the problem? How come we can't go faster? You know what they say? We don't have enough time. It's not money, it's time. My life is chaos, they say. You kidding? Look at the stuff I have to go put up with. So we try to help them think about, how do you create time? You know, Newton had, you all think he had 3 laws, right? There's 3 laws of Newton? No. I took a postgraduate course, said there was a 4th one, he just didn't talk much about it. And that is you can create time. This is what we try to talk to our middle managers about through the human resource process, which is a huge, big deal for us. How do you create time? You have 10 people working for you, let's say. 2 of them work miracles every day. You almost feel guilty because you didn't give them any coaching. But they're so terrific. You never have to, you don't have to worry about them. Then you have 2 people. What do? They walk by your office and a cloud descends on you. Right? I mean, why do people respond to that? Because they see it all the time. So if you have 10 people, 2 are great, 2 suck your very life juices out of you. All they do is bitch about the system, talk about these problems, and this bureaucrat won't let me do things, and HR's gotten in the way, and like that, right? How do you create time? You say to these 2, thank you, goodbye. And then you create time. You say that's easy in industry. I would argue that in any organization, from non-government organizations to government organizations to industry, there are examples of people who figure out how to make that happen, even with all the constraints that we have. So we spend a lot of time in the human resource system so as to get people with all the skills, so we don't actually have to fire a lot of people, but deal with them in their 20s and early 30s, so we have the right selection and the right flow of people so that doesn't happen. By the way, I've gotten well off of my prepared comments, but it doesn't matter. It's interesting, I thought. Now, so what are some of the metrics here? In the 4 years that we've gotten started on this, we've taken out $2 billion of cost. We have doubled our working capital turns. Somebody asked, what's the primary measure of performance? Working capital turns, I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Reg Jones. He was the CEO of GE before there was a Jack Welch. Did you know that there was a GE before Jack Welch? I bet you nobody knew that. He was CEO of the year for a long time. I mean, this is one heck of a fine company. And my guess is there's some GE, are there any GE folks here in the room? No? Okay, well, it's a wonderful company. And he said there's 2 measures that I look at when I'm out in an operating unit. How quickly do they turn their inventories and how fast do people pay? So that's all I need to know. Now why? This is back in 1978. Well, because if your customers pay you real quick, they're not too upset with you. And if you can have them pay you real quick and have rapidly moving inventory, it means you don't have waste or rework in your system. Think about that. It's really pretty profound and straightforward, profound thing. So to me, the one measure, I think it was the captain, I can't quite see it, Admiral, sorry, sir, that the Admiral said was that working cap turns would be, if I had to pick one, just one, it would be that. But there's a lot more than that. So we've taken, we've doubled our working cap turns, taken $2 billion out. Our award fees have increased by 13 percentage points. Now, that speaks both of where we were and where we are. We like where we are because we're at record levels. Our percentage of yellow and red programs is minuscule and dramatically lower than it has ever been. We have 1,000 of our people are black belts or experts. Actually, it's 1,100, and 14,000 are green belts or specialists. But we have to take it to the next level. I think it's fascinating as we all talk about the value stream, which I think is a really powerful concept. It says, and we all know, everything starts from the customer. You got to be pulled. It has to be a pull from the customer. Well, for us to have a pull from the customer, we think it's helpful if the customer himself has training in these basic principles. So we now have about 2,500 Six Sigma projects going on. Over 500 of them have customers on them. Our strongest advocates are our customers. In fact, we had a leadership team meeting. Our top 300 people came into, we do this every year. And the theme this year was customer-focused marketing. I won't go into all of it. So we had a whole bunch of customers come from Ron Kadish, who said quality, performance, and Pete Aldrich, who said meet your commitments. Then we had a senior 3-letter agency official, a 1-star general from the Air Force, and a colonel from the Army, all talking to us about Six Sigma. Now, they're talking to one of the most rabid group of people you've ever seen on this subject. And they're telling us how important it is, and let's get going faster and broader and deeper. And I'll tell you, the Air Force general, just a quick little thing, he was a colonel at the time. By the way, he got promoted from colonel to general, so this is a good story. He inherited a screwed-up program, one of ours. And he said, we're just going to start over. Throw the bums out, because this thing is so screwed up, there's no hope to it. his customer, a warfighter, called him, who was a general, and said, "Colonel, are you nuts? They may be screwed up, but we need this right now. If you start all over again, well, there's no hope." So the colonel calls us in, and we said, "Well, sir, there is an answer to this. It's called Six Sigma." And he went, "Oh, my God, TQM. But I have no choice. I have to, because the general's going to..." Well, I forgot, 6 months' time, this guy has become a true believer. He was up talking to us about all the metrics. And then the civilian from one of the three-letter agencies said, he went through this long peroration, and his concluding comment was, "Six Sigma saves lives." And he had tears in his eyes when he said it. And all of it starts from the basic principle, which I say for the third time because I think very few people get it, is that it starts from envisioning the desired end state. Whether it's processing payroll without an error, whether it's the line rate out in the logistics center, or whether it's achieving your strategic goals. It can be applied anywhere, and that's been one of the biggest problems of the whole Lean initiative, is it got started out in the manufacturing cell. People were able to optimize the cell. They didn't do anything to the flow of material, so they weren't able to get a big deal. Once they fixed that, they couldn't get engineering into it. And then once they got engineering into it, they couldn't get their marketing folks into it. It's just been this long and agonizing spiraling. Well, it's going to be long and agonizing if we started at the micro level. It has to be started at the enterprise level, and it has to be started by somebody who knows and is passionate about it. Therefore, if the CEO or the senior commander can't get up and talk about it for 20 minutes with facts and figures, then why would you follow them? And how are they going to learn? They're going to learn by going out in the line and getting dirty and figuring it out. Because you cannot learn it by reading a book. We did bore in on certain values, and we tried to anchor them in real behaviors that were critical to our transformation. The first was, we're here to satisfy the customer. You go, more of this general stuff. Well, you know what, those of us who are in the defense industry, a lot of us invented the things that we sell, and we said, in effect, we know more than the customer knows. You say you want X, the answer is Y, here's Y. Except some competitor doesn't know anything, he actually offers X. And it's because we didn't listen. So customer focus. Speed and agility and empowerment. That is, don't look up, look in the mirror. I can't tell you how many times people came to me for approval. So what are you coming to me for? What do I know about this? What do you want me to know about it? Look in the mirror, figure it out. Integrity, that's a whole nother speech. The crux of any organization has to be integrity, and I'm afraid that some of my peers in the CEO community have done terrible things to erode this basic principle of corporate America and indeed of the American capitalist system, and we've got a lot of rebuilding to do, but that's for another day to talk about. And one company, which means we have to be seen as the same partner with all of our customers. We are very complicated. We have 200 different facilities. We can't look like 200 different places, and yet everybody in one of these 200 places has pride in being better than anybody in the other 200. Because why do they say that? Because we are basically tribal by nature. And we had to work real hard to scrub that out, and we're not done yet. Communications was key. As I said, frequency and consistency and intensity. We began frequent emailing to our employees. We do it all the time. It's simple and extremely powerful, and now we're using the web, the web TV and all that, and skip levels and site visits, and I bet you I spend 20% of my time dealing directly with frontline employees, because they've all got to hear the same story. But you know, it's hard to get the story out if you have all these layers between you and the people that do the work. I don't do any work, I mean, in that sense. How many people are between me and the people who do the work? And what are the opportunities of the message getting attenuated, to say it nicely? My guess is somebody can have a doctoral thesis on it, but I just take the number of layers and make that the exponent, and that's how tough it is. So we've taken out between 3 and 4 layers of management in this company. And our speed and agility has picked up dramatically. We spent a lot of time creating feedback mechanisms. We need to know what we're doing. We can find ourselves in this creation of our own, where all we hear is, attaboy. Keep going. So we just survey the heck out from our customers and from our employees. And then when we get the data, we do something about it. Now, since we've got started, on average, we were in the lower decile on employee satisfaction. For sure, lower quartile. In some cases, in one or two instances, way up there. Today, we have a number of dimensions where we are in the 95th and above percentile in 4 years' time. By the way, a couple that we are the most proud of is our employees' belief that we are here to satisfy the customer. We're in the 97th percentile of all 250 companies that are in the rating system. We're in the 92nd percentile in terms of people recommending us as a good place to work. 4 years ago, we were not in the 92nd percentile. Goal alignment really is critical. Our employees say they know what we're all about and why. That's a predictor of good performance. If your troops don't know, then that's not going to happen. Execution has become an important buzzword in industry and throughout government. My former boss, Larry Bossidy, wrote a book about it. You ought to read it. It was painful for me to read it, however. It was an opportunity for 250 pages of hearing the same thing I've been hearing for 8 years. That was hard. But I got it. You got to have predictable processes. You got to get stuff done, not just get up and give the speeches. So we put in the processes. IPDS, Integrated Product Development System, EVMS. Boy, are we true believers in EVMS. We have it on about 6,000 programs. Some of them are done weekly, as I know is true with some of our competitors. CMM and CMMI is another whole speech, a true believer in that. Risk management, workforce planning, where are you going to have a retirement problem? 5 years' time, what are you going to do about it now? Dramatically improved information systems. And the result, just let me recap it again. Costs way down, working capital way down, employee morale way up, customer satisfaction way up, win rates are up, and we're a long way away from being admirable. We've also now, though, talked about what do we do to take it to the next level. And it's real simple how we're going to take it to the next level. We're going to design these practices in the earliest stages of the design process. You know, it's easier to design an actuator to Six Sigma. How do you design a system? Well, we better figure it out. What do we do to get our customers as knowledgeable as we, because the value chain is pulled by them. And the more they know about transformation and lean and Six Sigma and changing an entire enterprise, the more competent they are, the more competent we are. How competent do you think Michael Dell's suppliers are? Think they're pretty good? Why? Because the standards are really high. Therefore, the next group is our suppliers. How many of you are in the supplier community? If you'd raise your hands, so I have a sense of. Okay. The opportunities here are huge. What I say to our folks, 70% of our costs are procured. I said, imagine if, this is the way I say it, if those vendors, see that immediately gets everybody's head set on, they're the enemy, right? Imagine if those vendors never changed their process. If they were always on time, they never screwed up quality, how much better could we be? Oh, God, we'd be fabulous. We'd be terrific. So I say, well, except they're us. What are we doing to make them better? And that's a huge opportunity. Integrated supply chain is the whole ethic around it. You can't do it with, we have 45,000 suppliers. Is this nuts or what? So we'll have a whole lot less of them. We're going to hold them to very high standards, including public scores. If you're going to supply us a set avionics, we're going to compare you against all the other avionics suppliers, and we're going to let you and them know how you're doing. You think competitive juices don't get people going? They sure do. So, look, transformation is hard stuff, and there are challenges. To say people resist change understates it. They say people love change, they don't, they hate change. What they want is everybody else to change, not them to change. We revert to old behaviors also when things start to get stressful, and when you go through big change, by definition there's a lot of stress, so people want to go back to what they know and are comfortable with, and they can hide from you for a long time. So we have to make the risk of not changing more painful than the risk of changing. Hence, that focus on middle management. We can create time. One way to do it is to try to get people's attention. So we have 500 new directors in our company out of a force of 1,200. Continuous learning is another key. This outside bias I was talking about. How do we stay current? How do we stay eager to learn? By recognizing that if an idea comes from the outside, it might not be a communist conspiracy. So we're trying to put a learning culture into our organization. And again, here, we are learning from the armed services. We go to